Hi, everybody. Thank you for attending our July Fireside with FedTech. This is a super special one because we welcome Blue Knight, which is a collaboration between JLABS and Barter. They're our sponsors today, and we are so fortunate to welcome Jeffrey Lee, whose company sits within the Blue Lab group. So Jeffrey is the creator and lead designer behind mPod's vision, which is to improve accessibility to healthcare insights through next generation diagnostics. He's a seasoned entrepreneur with experience leading startup teams, crafting business development to technical architecture. He holds a BS and a master's in engineering and bioengineering from Cornell University, where his engineering focus was on hardware integration for medical devices, and his research was focused on synthetic biology. So Jeffrey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll just shout out to my team, Tony and Joanna, who are also with us in the audience today. I would not be here without them. So shout out to both of them for being here and for making mPod a reality.
Wonderful. That's so nice. So before we start, people are always curious, where are you located?
We're based in New York.
Okay,
City.
in New York City?
Yeah.
Very nice.
Well, I was upstate first, came down a lot, and then kind of set roots down there. Yeah.
Well, New York's a very fun place to be. A very good place to be in the innovation space.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh. So you talked about being upstate. That's assuming when you were at Cornell, correct?
That's right.
And you did both undergrad and your master's in bioengineering at Cornell, which is a wonderful school. My brother went there.
And I know that actually.
Yeah, lots of Cornell alumni. But when we were talking and getting ready for this, you said that you wanted to be a doctor, and clearly the medical school thing did not happen, right?
No. I should probably clarify that, though. It was, being Asian and all, it was the path that all Asian parents want their kids to follow. And my sister followed that path, so we're all good there. They got their piece in preparing. I was a bit more of a rebel, so yeah, I was actually very much on it. It was senior year, second semester, when I took my first entrepreneurship or engineering and scientist class, and it just kind of like, boom, hit me. I took my MCATs, I prepped everything already. Wow. Was kind of on the path to med school.
Wow.
I did a lot of shadowing at Johns Hopkins. I'm from the Baltimore area. I grew up in the Baltimore area, so I was at Hopkins for a bit. It just really kind of clicked with me when I was like, wow, this is what I've been looking for so long. And it was entrepreneurship for scientists, engineers, gave me my first taste on how to really take the very engineering, very sciencey background that I had and have an outlet that I felt would actually make a big impact into the space. Yeah.
And so that was a class during your master's degree or your undergrad?
I was doing my master's.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was something that actually ended up counting towards my master's, but I took it during my final semester of senior year. Yeah, Cornell.
Yeah, it's interesting how those paths change. So when you essentially entered college, you didn't think that you would become an entrepreneur. You thought that you'd be becoming a doctor.
No, for sure. It was an interesting pathway. It was an interesting start. Honestly, I think one thing led to another. I started taking the class, obviously had a lot of fun in the class. And at the end of the semester, I was like, what do I do to continue doing this? Because this is phenomenal.
And that was like the start of your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. I think I started, I wouldn't say later, but quite a bit later than some others that started earlier in their undergrad. It was senior year when I started my journey, and I didn't really have any experience in entrepreneurship before that.
And so what was that like? How did you get, so you took this class and then how did you get started? You can't, wake up one day, hey, I want to start a company.
No. So my first taste of it was, so I talked to, senior year, I was going to my master's. I had an internship lined up already, and it was like the path I was planning on taking. I went up to my professor and I was like, I want to do more of this. How do I do it? And he said, you got to get your hands dirty. You got to really go out there and join a startup or do a startup and really understand what it's like day to day. And I said, okay. I dropped my internship I had lined up. This was like May, and I went to New York City. I joined a startup that was just on the ground floor. After paying my first month's rent, I had $12 left in my pocket, and with deposit, of course, in New York City because it's expensive. And I joined the startup, and I had an absolute blast. One day, I was like in this bougie place, drinking crazy things and eating expensive food. The next day, I was literally trying to find what cart had the cheapest bagels to eat the next morning. So it was like, it was crazy, but I learned so much getting my hands dirty, taking the riskier path. And honestly, you can't really learn it in any other way. I was like, try to join a consulting group that works with startups. And the reality is, if you really want to throw yourself into startups, you just got to do it. You got to take the risk. Tony and Joanna know the pain as well. When we were starting mPod, it was difficult trying to get something off the ground when you really had nothing. But being scrappy is, I think, the thing that really builds character when it comes to being an entrepreneur.
Well, that's like kind of startup life. One day you're eating really fancy food. The next day you're eating leftover bagels from 2 days ago. So um, when you started, it was that company that you first joined. How did you identify that company? And that company was part of JLABS, which is how you then got to JLABS as well, right?
That's right. So actually, just prior to that, I had a bit of a life before I joined New York City. So this is when I actually moved to New York and joined the startup that was a part of JLabs. My entrepreneurship experience actually came right after I had that summer in New York City. I started my own startup that was Export, which we were doing electric skateboards, which is nothing that anyone else would have ever imagined me doing. But I did, and I learned a lot. I built a lot of really great technical skill in a space that I was never planning on learning, in like electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, a lot of manufacturing, and I apply now to my work here at mPod as well. So the two kind of fused together and kind of made that journey happen. But yeah, we went to CES twice, went to the Detroit Auto Show. We did a lot of really cool things. And that built a lot of the knowledge base that I had to come and join the company that's at JLabs at the times in New York City. JLabs, I think, just opened 12 months before I joined this company. And they were just moving into JLabs when I joined them. And it was a great experience for me. It's my first experience in startups in the space of the medical world when it comes to funding, grant funding, and just, it's a very different space to be operating in when you have people's lives at stake, right? So yeah.
Yeah, maybe let's compare and contrast for a second something like an electric skateboard to a startup that has people's lives at stake. Like, what are some of the commonalities, but then what are also some of the differences that you saw?
I think the core of what makes a startup, the grind, the passion, honestly, the perseverance to push through, because you're going to have a lot more bad days than good days, not to discourage those out there, but it is the journey that you have to take. And we're rolling with the punches and seeing what you have passion about. It's also about really being smart and pushing out not just what you know, but who you know, and connecting those dots. So I think those skills really that I learned and applied while doing Export, I applied a lot with while joining this company as well. And before, this is pre mPod, and I'm applying that as well. So yeah.
So you just mentioned something that's really important with startups, and it's been kind of my experience too. It's a lot about who you know. Yeah. Tell me about this network. How has a network supported you over your time as an entrepreneur?
I think a network, when it comes, it's like a 50-50 type thing. Some may argue it's a little bit different, but for me, it's not just about what you know, it's about who you know when it comes to success in startups. And it's partially because it allows you to connect yourselves to places and opportunities you wouldn't have otherwise had. But another significant part is just being able to allow you to grow technically as well. So for me, networking is taking out any experience that you have that you think may or may not be useful to you, but still taking advantage of that, because the people that entrepreneurship is a huge world, but also sometimes it's a really small world where the person that you met at a networking event outside of, like, one of the critical people that we met was in the lobby of a conference event that we were a part of. And it turned out to be the big connections that allowed us to scale as a company, as a manufacturing partner. Yeah, and it's something that we ingrain in at mPod. Joanna, Tony, and I are very much ingrained, kind of really, I'd say, absorbing the NSF I-core spirit about going out there, learning, and doing your customer discovery. And I think that networking is both two-sided. One, to help internally for the company to grow, but externally as well, to understand who you're developing products and developing things for. So for me, networking is just really putting yourself out there, learning from people and just being able to build those relationships, whether or not you think they're relevant, because a lot more than often than not, they're relations that you would never expect that just happen. Yeah.
So you mentioned something that's at the core of FedTech is this customer discovery. So part of the network, what does customer discovery mean to you, and how did it help you as you've been building mPod?
Oh God, I wish Joanna and Tony could jump in on this with me, because we really do embrace the this NSFI core significantly. For me, and it's as scientists and engineers, we are very head in the weeds on the technology. And many times we forget really what we're developing for. And we think, oh, that's cool. It makes sense for us. But we can't be disconnected from who we're developing it for. Because in the end, if you're developing something cool that nobody's going to use or nobody wants or isn't exactly suited for someone else, it's pointless. Right. And we forget that. We think, we understand the technology best, so we are the person that should be answering that question. And the reality is no. You have to get out of that mindset and do it so quickly. Fail early, fail fast, learn and iterate very, very quickly in order to be able to build that kind of iteration when it comes to development and targeting, painting out the vision for the company. Really.
So you were working in a startup. Yep. And I'm curious about how it went from working in a startup and this electric skateboard to then leading your own startup and then specifically mPod. How did that get there?
So leading my own startup at Expo was a great experience. A little bit more of a soft skills that I transferred, some hard skills as well from the technical side. Going from working in a startup, and they were funded by government grants as well. So it's very similar to what we're doing here. They had some significant funding behind this, a great team. When I joined JLABS and everything else, it was different for me, but it allowed me to see the internals of, how do you actually craft your way, a path internally. And I think that was a big learning experience for me. The different connections you have to find funding, understanding what is necessary, and the people that you need to know to make it happen. It's the reason why I brought mPod back to JLABS, because the connections and the opportunities that it allowed the previous company that I worked with to grow was incredible within the J&J network itself, but beyond that, the ties that the J&J network had. And with Blue Knight, through Rachel, we wouldn't have been able to join JLABS. I actually applied to JLABS to bring it in because I was really excited. Like, I have a startup. I want to bring it back to JLABS because that's a great place for an early stage company to grow. But I don't really have a way of affording it. And I applied kind of knowing that we weren't going to be able to afford it, but wanted to just put, my hat in the ring for the company. And then out of the preparation, this is why networking is important. Rachel kind of picked up on it and saw the work that we were doing, thought it was really exciting. And then Blue Knight became a thing. And Blue Knight is the reason why a company as young as ours is able to be a part of JLABS. So
for those of you in the audience, I mean, you and I are very familiar. Tell folks in your own words what JLAB is, what Blue Knight is, and then Rachel is in our audience. Tell people who Rachel is.
Okay, well, Rachel is the ultimate, I would say, call her queen of everything that is Blue Knight. And she was very early.
Rachel, if you're listening, that's your official new title for your signature line, the queen of everything Blue Knight.
As director of the BARDA Alliance, she did a phenomenal job. I think a lot of the work that she did under early on before the conception and onboarding of Blue Knight was huge as well. So not to discount any of that, but her work with us through Blue Knight. So Blue Knight's just a great way for us to link in with mentors and support through people who've been in the industry and been in the place for so long. And we've learned, sometimes it's just quick calls, 30 minutes, 45-minute calls that we have access to, people that we wouldn't have had access to before, mentors within BARDA, mentors within J&J. And Blue Knight is basically the fusion that allows that to happen. JLABS for us, there's a huge network through the J&J network as well. So it's kind of a really great fusion of, you go to a lab, you're early stage of the startup, you need to have guidance. And I think that's really, where Blue Knight has helped us a lot. And JLABS on its own right has helped us a lot. So it's a really great fusion of being able to be tapped into this network of these people. Sometimes you don't really, have a specific reason you join a meeting or talking to someone, or you're not quite sure, but you learn along the way. And for us, the biggest kind of questions that we were able to pick up on are realizing the questions we weren't asking. And that's what we've been able to learn through all the connections that Blue Knight afforded us.
So what were some of those questions? Because there's a lot of entrepreneurs here on the line. What are some of those questions that you weren't asking?
The big thing that we weren't asking was like, what are we doing wrong? It's really the thing. We always ask the question of what should we do next? What's working? What's not working? And the question is of what are we doing wrong? You don't really always ask yourself that. And more often than not, you don't necessarily have people to answer that question for you. And I think that's one thing that we've come to realize while talking to these people. They've, through a constructive criticism, made us realize to ask ourselves and also understand what we're doing not necessarily doing the right way, even though it makes sense to us, right? So it's part of that whole loop of customer discovery, but also having the support from people who understand it as well.
So let's get to like mPod. What is mPod?
So mPod was founded out of a hackathon. That's how I met Tony.
Yeah.
Out of the New York City Health Hackathon, January 2019. It was still cold. Trains were running like crazy.
And no COVID yet, January 2019.
No COVID, I know. Back when we didn't, I look at people now and I'm like, gosh, without masks, we just are such filthy human beings. It's just crazy. But it was before COVID. I still remember when I met Tony the night before, and the next morning he was telling me about Joanna because he met her. I was on my way through, on my way uptown to meet because we're uptown at Cornell Weill. And he was like, "You've got to come. This is crazy. You got to meet this girl that just joined us and our team." And I was like, "Okay, I'm on my way." And it was a great experience. We worked together for a whole weekend. So the hackathon was 48 hours to throw an idea together that formed a company, pitch it, and we ended up winning it together. And it was crazy. It was a crazy experience. And usually I would say most startups don't start out of hackathons. Like what are the chances that you're going to meet people on a whim, right? Because I didn't really like pick anyone out.
Right.
Didn't pick each other out. It just happened that we were on a team together, and we just had such a great experience working together. We started working together, and that's when mPod was formed. We're like, okay, let's do it. mPod, the logo, actually, funny enough, is the same one that Joanna put together on some weird website off the cuff, so that our presentation would have a logo, and it just stuck. So
there you go.
So we started there, did a lot of NSF iCore work, customer discovery work, very early on. That's where
Did you get an iCore grant early on, or you just knew?
So we did the NSF iCore through the Cornell node first.
Yep.
And from there, we kind of went through that for the first summer, and then through the winter, we did our work through the NSF teams, national teams. So we did join the full like nationals team in New York City. Actually, that's where we did all that work there. And so mPod at its core is, like you very aptly introduced at the beginning, is really about doing a paradigm shift in the way that we approach diagnostics in the world. And it's about increasing accessibility to healthcare insights. Diagnostics. You think about it right now, the workflow that you go about, you want to get something, you want to understand something about your health. Like a lot of people these days, it's like, I want to know if I have COVID or not, right? That's a great example. And it's difficult, even in this world that we live in right now, where we have state-of-the-art medical facilities in New York City. Getting access to knowing whether you have COVID or not so you can go visit a loved one was impossible within the first 6, even 9 months of COVID. And this is something that is very rampant across different diagnostic spaces, not just for infectious diseases. A work that we were doing very early on, and we're starting a pilot on, was sepsis triage. So people come in, they're not necessarily sure about whether or not they're septic in an ER, for example, an ICU. And right now they have to wait 6 hours. Every hour you wait is an additional 7% chance that you're going to die. And this is literally in a hospital in New York City. This is happening right now. And it's crazy and scary to think about what lack of insights that we have in our health, and being able to increase accessibility to that is our core. So mPod's core is leveraging aptamer-based diagnostics to allow us to be able to detect things more quickly than previously and be able to match the standard of care that's necessary. And it goes really beyond stuff here in the States. We're going to the global reach, and something that Joanna is spearheading significantly for us. And something she's very passionate about is global health and global health equity. So it's basically, we have feet on the ground in Brazil and in Africa. She has a team that she was working with in the UK as well. So being able to increase accessibility. So this is not just, do we have a tool that can get us these insights here in the States? This is also, can I afford to have these? Because even if a test, let's say, is available, if it's not affordable in these areas, then suddenly accessibility to those healthcare insights are also not available. So for us, the word accessibility hits a lot of fronts when it comes to financial, it comes to simplicity, the ability to perform certain tests, and accessibility from a financial perspective as well. So mPod's focus on a broad vision is to be able to improve this accessibility to healthcare insights the best way we can.
That's wonderful. And you have so much passion when you're talking about it. It kind of just exudes, and it seems through what you're talking about, like you really do believe that you're going to make a difference. And I think so clearly as well. But just going on to this topic of passion, what does this actually mean for you?
It's when you have something that you, honestly, for me, eat, breathe, sleep day in, day out, and it's not a problem. For me, passion is having such a strong drive to making something a reality that nothing else really matters. And it's, people can say you're a lunatic, crazy, but I think that's what really is important when it comes to people that want to have success in startups. Not saying that I am a definition of success. I think we still have a lot to learn, a lot to grow. We're still making mistakes, right? As we continue to grow, but it's being able to have that drive that no matter what happens, you're still going to come in and do it. Some people say, "Oh, I want to do startups because make money fast." Oh, it sounds like a fun way of not having to work too hard. Trust me, you're going to work harder in a startup than you ever worked on anything else. And then more importantly, I think you just have to be able to be so driven to making a vision a reality that nothing else can get in your way. That's the only way that you can really take it in. So I think passion and startups go very much hand in hand to drive the perseverance that's necessary to make a startup happen.
So we have folks on the line who from FedTech, from JLABS, like folks who are just at the very beginning of their entrepreneurial journey. So for those of those who are in the beginning, who wanting to get into startups, what advice do you have for them?
I only have my own perspective to go off of. But I think for me, it's just, you just got to join one. Either join one, or if you've got a great team, you're lucky enough to have a great team around you. Like I've been, Joanna, I'm sure feel the same way, hopefully, about me. But in general, yeah, it's about either you have a great idea that you have in your mind, and you have a team that works around with you that you can do it, or just starting work with an area that you feel is something you're passionate in. It's not saying that first one's going to work out or anything, but you're going to learn a lot along the way. But I would say just get your hands dirty. You actually have to live it to know it. And for me, I think that's the best way to kind of get started. And then to tap on that, one thing that I felt that I was very fortunate about doing startups at Cornell and in New York, and I've always found ways to tap us into networks that allow that guidance and mentorship to happen. You can't do it alone. One thing that you never feel about being in the startup is you never feel lonely. There are people who are either like-minded like you, or people who have gone through it further down the line than you, people who are in the space that you've never been before, that will help you along the way. And if you share that passion with them, this is an open field for you to reach out to anyone that can help you along the way. So I would say find that direction. I'm not saying it's the perfect direction first. Pick something, stick with it, and then find the people around you to help you. Surround yourself with the people that can actually make you get across the finish line.
So I encourage everybody to continue to put questions in the chat. I just have a couple more questions for Jeffrey, and then we're going to switch over to questions from our audience. So please continue. And it could be about anything, how his parents feel that he didn't go to medical school, or anything. So let's talk a little bit about your team. You talked a lot about Joanna and Tony, which is really wonderful that you guys have made such a great team, and you can just tell based on like what you've been talking about. So what do you think has made the three of you such a good team?
I think we're very relentless. And trust me, it's not always like smooth sailing, happy family. We are very, very passionate, very, very driven. And I think we bring very different perspectives to the table. I think a lot of it has been our ability to see that we have a common vision and being able to come into alignment with how we're going to accomplish that. And yeah, really truly being relentless and putting personal sacrifice in to make mPod happen. Because I know I have, but I also know how much Joanna and how much Tony has put in as well. Like I said, startups are not easy. It's not a 9 to 5. It's not like I'm going to leave and that's it. You really do live, eat, breathe, sleep startup life. And I think I think we're really lucky to find people and form a team around people who have that mindset, because otherwise, yeah, it really wouldn't work.
That's wonderful. And then as far as vision, what is your vision for mPod?
I think like I said, at the grander scheme of things, it's really about improving accessibility to healthcare insights. The first one, obviously over the last year, has been with COVID. What we're developing in-house now at JLABS is our own internal platform that will be the chassis that carries that and improve accessibility. So it's, in a nutshell, a test that is as easy to use as a pregnancy test. So necessarily always saying pee on a stick, or let's say that you spit on a stick, or use a sample that is really simple and accessible. So it's as easy to use as that anyone can use it, a kid could use it. But one that provides insights to the level of a complex PCR test that you would technically need a whole lab in. So we're trying to build a laboratory in a chip.
Oh, wow.
And that the vision is being able to leverage aptamers in the best way within the system. Aptamers are essentially the cousin to antibodies that have been in the space for decades. And aptamers have been kind of the nuclear fusion of the medical space. Everyone's like, oh, it's a next best thing, but no one's able to get out. And we think that the big issue is the platform. Kind of like how Apple develops software for its hardware, right? The integration is seamless. While Windows develops Windows 10, now Windows 11 that just came out. But for a full multitude, the tightness of integration sometimes works.
Right.
You're just doing that type, but we're taking kind of Apple's vision of integration hardware and software, so that the chassis, the chip that we're developing into house itself, and the actual software, which is our detection scheme, which is the aptamers. So it's a fusion of both of those two things that's going to drive it. So we can say if we have a new target, a new variant for COVID, we can pop a new aptamer out in under a week, and we could have a test for you working in under a week, in 6 days. And this can be applied to many different applications for drug monitoring, for cancer biomarker screening. And so the world there's a lot of things we want to apply for. Apply this technology flow, but the first starts with this platform we're developing now.
So do you envision this being something as widely available as like a pregnancy test, or would it be more in like a doctor's office kind of thing?
Widely available as a pregnancy test. You could pop into a CVS and get it, or you could, these days everyone is ordering everything, so we can get it overnight. Like, how amazing would it have been if you just sat in your home, you're like, I want to visit my grandma, I want to visit my parents, and like, I want to just order some tests. It wasn't even possible, but being able to do that in-house and we have that security, that's how easily we want it to be accessible.
So that's the vision, that one day I'd be able to order sticks, let's say on Amazon, have 20 sticks and be like, oh, I've got a cough, and then let me see if I have COVID by using this stick.
Let's say that you had issues after a surgery. You wanted to know, am I septic? Am I not? Do I have any risks? Or you're just ill in some way or another? Being able to have access to those healthcare insights immediately. And one thing we're working out to complete the picture is the world is becoming more and more digital. The complete ecosystem will be digital. You'll be able to collect and gather those insights, and it will be immediately pushed into the digital backbone that your physical, your primary care physician can take care of right away. So it's about, it really is, in all sense of the words, increasing accessibility to your healthcare, your health. Is what we're really planning on. But baby steps.
Baby steps. So then tell me about kind of where mPod is today. Have you been gaining some traction? Have you gotten customers? You're doing a lot of technical development right now.
Yeah, we're still pre-revenue. We've been very fortunate to have the support of JLABS and Blue Knight to be able to conduct this work at a point that we probably at a different point in time might not be able to. And we have some funding and support from government grants that are keeping us afloat at the moment. Our goal is to get this platform off the ground to begin generating revenue, so commercializing it. And we're just really figuring out that platform. So our focus is just keeping our heads down, getting that across the line first with these grants, start generating revenue. And I think that's the stage that we're going to be starting to actually preach that we're going to start looking to building our own scale up for seed rounds, seed rounds and Series A's as well is very much in the next, I would say, 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
We don't want to be funding greedy, and we've been very fortunate not to be funding desperate at the moment, but we know that we need to look to that next step. And it's something that we're looking actively to start working on really right now, so that it can go in parallel with the completion of development. We expect the platform to be done by the end of this year, and we're going to start commercializing in 2022.
So how does somebody with a master's in bioengineering do these financial forecasts and roadmaps and things like that? You have no formal business training.
No. I would say, like, you learn along the way, and
sure.
you don't do it on your own. I think that's one thing that I've learned doing mPod, is that you need to find the people who know exactly what they're doing and know how to do it well. And even though you want to take on everything, you need to learn how to delegate and make sure that the things that you're really good at, you're doing, and things that you're not necessarily the best at, you find people who can do it better than you and let it go from there. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, let's transition now to some of the questions that are in the chat. Thank you for those who have put things in the question and answer section. Please continue to put stuff in the questions and answers. We will plan to get to all of them. So from Just Price, what were some of the most challenging aspects during and after the program? Were there any experiences, situations that surprised you during the process of building a company? And I believe they're talking about during the JLABS program.
Okay. Well, we're from what I've been told, we're still not after the program yet. We're still in it, very much in it. The processes that surprised me during the journey, the challenging aspects. I think that the most challenging things is the unexpected. And this is more on the technical side, things that you weren't expecting. And the challenge really comes down to, like, you've got people that you're talking to that are expecting certain deliverables, and being able to answer to that and be able to work around that. And learning how to build yourself enough cushion to not make that happen. Situation that surprised me during the building of the company. Yeah, I think every day is a surprise, to be honest. I know that's a pretty blanket answer, but there's always something new that you don't expect. I think that goes to the core of being, you have to really be quite agile and respond to things each and every day. What mindset that served you best on your path in entrepreneurship? I think it's really,
it's my job to read the question. No, it's fine. Yes, no, but that's a great question. The mindset served you best in your path. I mean, clearly you very much embody the lean business model, startup path, the entrepreneurial mindset, things that you read in books, just based on our quick conversation here. But yeah, what mindset, what kind of keeps you going?
I think there's a mindset on that vision, on what we're really trying to achieve, is what really realigns you. And and I think it's the mindset that you need to celebrate your wins, but understand that there are it's a bumpy path. If you go in there, expecting a smooth sailing to revenue and money and everything else. It's not necessarily the case. And there are people that are able to achieve that, but it's not really like they've also gone through a lot to get there. So the mindset of being really focused, I think, and really positive, I think more than anything else, to take in the punches day in and day out. I'm making entrepreneurship sound really, really like violent, but it's really not. It's just that it's a path that you have to really be able to be willing to persevere through.
Right. Wonderful. From Michael, in networking, what can you offer the person you meet? And do you give a business card, which I am surprised that business cards have not been disrupted yet? And then do you give like a 15-second elevator pitch?
Yeah, normally when you go to you have to have a 15-second elevator pitch just to introduce yourself and who you represent. Usually you're at a conference or some event for a specific reason. And I actually take a little bit of a different approach. I feel like the best way to network is to also give them a chance to tell a little about themselves. It's a good opportunity because people like to open up, and most people don't actually finish an elevator pitch or a conversation or introduction with requests, but allows the conversation to flow. I don't hand out business cards like crazy because people, let's be honest, we don't keep them. The greatest the kind of like networking building we try up on is really like very personal conversations. So phone number, an email. Sometimes it'll just be like add me on LinkedIn, but then we're messaging there. Joanna's really good at this, by the way. I wish she'd be able to answer this. She's like an absolute pro. She's better than me at being able to go to these conferences and just cracking out these conversations and really being able to push out the conversation at the end. I think the thing I'll close out with that is pitching is one thing, but if you're going out there just for the purpose of I can pitch to this many people, it's not going to really pan out. It's about being able to build a relationship within those 15 seconds so that you can follow up on it and allow it to just really go beyond that first intro call or conversation.
Wonderful. I like that. What time frame from start to finish and getting off the ground with your business and making profit, which you kind of mentioned this a little bit when talking about the timeline. And I know that as far as like making profit could be very variable, but if you don't mind just repeating, some of that vision that you were talking about.
Yeah. I think, like I said, if your focus is trying to get to profit quickly, that's great. Because that is what's going to keep your company alive. But what's going to take you there is that mindset of just being very dogged and being able to push it. The time frame varies. I mean, there really isn't necessarily, I wouldn't call it as time as much as milestones that you're trying to achieve to be able to get there. Right. I think it's a very good mindset to be thinking about what are you trying to do to get to a profit, to get to revenue, because otherwise it's just a hobby, right? But at the same time, it's important to make sure you understand that things are always going to take a lot more time than you do. So don't be disheartened by delays. Yeah.
Great question there. This is interesting, a little more on the technical weeds from Mark. What programming language are you using to build your software platforms?
Everything.
Everything.
You have low end down in C, everything up to, yeah. And I'll say I'm terrible at answering this question because I am not at all a programmer. But from what I've heard from our software team, yeah, it's really everything. We have ML models, AI models that we're developing in-house. Stuff that we're putting to microcontrollers. So we're going down to like low level C, C++. So yeah, whatever makes the most sense. But nothing too novel, to be honest. I don't know what the intention of the question is, but we're not like reinventing that wheel. We're just trying to figure out what suits the situation best.
Yeah. As far as that goes, let's talk about, like you mentioned, software team. You're obviously more hardware focused. How do you put together like a technical team? How do you work with various people's expertise? And are you bringing in like contractors to do the software side?
Depends. Depends on the project and what's actually happening. But yeah, significant amount of our early stage, the way that we kind of do it. No problem, Mark. The way that we go about doing it is, focusing first on getting to build those relationships once again. We don't typically just bring someone on as an employee unless we've known them for a while. We start as consultants, and then within that pipeline, we bring them as an employee afterwards. The team changes a lot. So you have to be very, very agile in being able to put in a good structure so that we can bring people in and out and it's delightful. I'm making it sound like we have something great and amazing and great working. It's quite messy. It's a startup world. Things always change. I think the biggest thing is when you start building these technical abilities, this is where networking becomes key. You need to know people. If you don't know people, you need to know people who might know people, and then you just keep working at it until you get there.
Yeah, it's that power of networking.
Yeah, for sure.
There you go. How are you dealing with the medical approval process that usually takes very long and many, many years?
Yeah,
Or is this not applicable? I mean, so essentially the FDA process is a real beast.
it is a beast. And I wish, once again, Joanna knows this inside and out. So I'm probably going to butcher this answer. It is, but from what she and I've discussed, it's hard. It is long. The best way to streamline it is understanding what they want before you even start working on everything to make sure it fits. And being very close contact with them. So part of the networking is we have people we can comfortably reach out to for answers and to kind of pass by. I mean, the FDA is actually, it is a beast, but they try to build relationships with people early on as well. So it's just on you to kind of reach out to them and build that relationship as well, a two-way street in order to get you across the finish line.
So are you down the road? It's definitely part of your path and your vision that you're going to have to go through the FDA regulatory process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you're already starting to make those connections.
Yeah, we're well in depth in that, particularly for COVID. I mean, with the EUA in there, the process is a bit shorter. But anyone with the EUA will eventually get 510K as well. So, and for any diagnostic out there, it's going to require 510K. So it's an arduous process, but it's about building those relationships early and really understanding what they're looking for. Because in the end, it's people on the other side of that application portal that's making these decisions. So if you can build that, you can bridge that gap easily. It does help in that alignment.
So one of the last questions, which please, we've got a little bit more time. Please continue to put questions in the chat if you have any more. But from Giovanna, what challenges came with developing during the pandemic? How did you manage to maintain work-life harmony during the possible ups and downs that may have stemmed from uncertainty of the time period?
I will say, I think one of the things that was difficult is not working in person. I'm very hands-on. We were able to navigate that pretty well. Me and Tony are in New York, so we were able to keep our close. We miss Joanna, who's over across the pond in the UK, and she's not able to come stay us as a person. I think there is a loss in that sense, but I think we coped quite well. We just kind of adapted to it, learning how to build those. We talk to each other multiple times every day. And I'm looking at my thing. I've got like 7 calls from Tony already today. So, and then Joanna and I talked earlier too. So it's just about maintaining that conversation and that connection to make it happen. Work-life balance, I would say, yeah, it's difficult to balance work and life. You just have to know when to draw that line. And actually to this, I as you can probably pick up, I'm quite crazy when it comes to like just continuing to work. And Tony and Joanna have been helping me balance that out a bit more, because the longevity of startups is being able to push it beyond just a sprint. It's a marathon, and you have to work hard at it, but you also have to balance that life. And it's good. They remind me from time to time. Tony reminds me, okay, we did a good rate today. I want to do this today. You know what? We're not going to lose anything waiting until tomorrow morning. So let's just wait till tomorrow. Do it then. And sometimes with a fresh mind, it's always good. So yeah.
There you go. Wonderful. Well, please continue to put questions in the chat. I've got just a few more for you as we wrap up here, Jeffrey, but this has been great. So you've got a lot of energy, and I definitely think mPod's going to be going places. What gives you inspiration?
Inspiration. I think you have the people that are clearly successful now. Your Elon Musk's and your I don't know. I guess the big thing. So it's been a little while, because I remember when I was thinking about this as well. It's right now. It's really about taking inspiration, but really making it your own, and that's one of the most important things. because you can find inspiration for certain people, but certain people are not you, right? So it's finding that balance between what works and what isn't. I think when you're amongst people who are like-minded, you can find a lot of inspiration and drive from those people. So I would say if you're looking for inspiration, associate yourself with people who live this in and out, and that energy just really does rub off. Like I know that energy rubs off when I'm going to JLABS. I know when I'm working with Tony, with Joanna. It's a ping pong ball. If you're working around people that are like-minded or as passionate as you, it's actually not that hard to find inspiration because you see it from everywhere.
Wonderful. Last chance for questions in the chat. And I've got one more question for you, Jeffrey. Okay, this is a hard one. So in a year from now, we're talking, where do you see mPod? What are we talking about in a year from now? End of July, 2022.
As a 4-core, mPod's still here. We're still all here working on it together, which I don't doubt, but I'd love for all of us to, post-pandemic, to be able to be together, sitting together, working in and out together. And I think really for us, in one way or another, being able to have the opportunity to really impact people's lives in a real way. And I'm saying this from a particular, like a healthcare perspective. And I know it should be like, oh, I want to get a product on the line, which obviously that doesn't imply that we have commercialize something out there. But if we can truly make an impact in people's lives, that's the whole reason why we're doing this, right? And it's about improving their healthcare insight. I think it's a tall tale to say that we can do all of that in 12 months, but making a step forward in that direction would be huge for us, and validating that we're doing something truly impactful. I think that would be a good 12-month thing in a very high level, because there are a lot that implies as well. But yeah.
One last question, which is a really good one about the technical side of things. When comparing to PCR DNA amplification and testing system sensibility and signal to noise ratio, it's important. So if you're replacing PCR testing by chip testing, what kind of sensitivity do you get in comparison to the PCR testing?
Yes.
Good final parting question.
Yeah, very, very technical. We are very much targeting being able to meet those targets, to meet the performance, of a PCR test. I think it'd be a bit of a tall tale to claim right off the bat that we can match that performance. And I don't think it's our intention to match that performance either, but it is pretty darn close. That's what we're.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really what that is our target. That's the standard that we want to achieve, right? So, and I think that's a pretty offhanded answer, but I don't want to make any promises or claim anything that I can't stand behind. So,
well, there you go. It speaks to the bigger vision of mPod, doesn't it?
Yes, it does indeed. Yeah.
Well, on that final note, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful. And all of you in the audience have been wonderful asking your questions. I am just going to share my screen very briefly with just some final parting thoughts. And Jeffrey, again, thank you. And thank you to our sponsor, Blue Knight. And there you go. There's your nice headshot, Jeffrey. Just as we part here, some upcoming events for Blue Knight and JLABS. These will all be sent out as a follow-up. And July 21st, September 15th. And if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, JLABS invites you to their grand opening on September 22nd. And we'll be sending out the links to this. And some other key links here that if you're interested in the Blue Knight program or JLABS or any of the portfolio companies as part of JLABS, all of these links will be sent out. And in addition, if you're interested in having more information about mPod, Jeffrey, the email that you mentioned in the beginning, info@mpod.io will be sent out along with your website. So Barring any other thoughts or questions, please let me know at any point if you want to suggest speakers for the Fireside with FedTech. We're taking a break for August, just like everybody should, and we'll be back in September with some great speakers, and then a follow on with Blue Knights towards the end of September. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Thank you, everybody. This was wonderful. Have a great day and a wonderful summer.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Bye.